Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Poly Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and I was just pressing the timer button so I could see what was going on. Thank you for joining me this week. This week, we have a very special show going on. HP released their first annual Work Relationship Index, which is a massive report about a lot of information that we didn't know what was going on in the world of work. A lot more about the why of work instead of the where that's been around the noise floor lately. My guest on the show this week is somebody who I ultimately report to, a friend of mine, Matt Buckley. Matt, say hi to everybody. Tell everyone who you are and what you do at HP.
Thanks, David. Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm Matt Buckley. I lead two people. I have two hats at HP. I look after our thought leadership programs, and I also head up the HP Foundation. Very lucky to have both of those elements in my job each day, and to get to work with people like David every day as well. So great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good. I got an akudo from me on recording as well. Good. I'll make sure I put that into the annual review cycle. So Matt, what is the Work Relationship Index? What was the genesis of it, and why did HP decide to commission this research and to sort of get it out in the public? Very odd because HP usually does things that are more sales pitch related, and this really isn't. This is almost pure thought leadership.
Well, thanks, David. Yeah, we're proud of this piece of work, actually. So the genesis of it was we're looking, obviously, hybrid work, the future of work as a whole is a big strategic priority for HP. And what we were seeing was looking at the press, looking at industry coverage, industry analyst coverage, press coverage, was that the focus of the conversation, as you mentioned just now, was kind of narrow. It's all very much about where people should be working going forward, and all of the tension between employers and employees about how many days people should be back in the office and so on, and policies around that. That was really what was driving a lot of the narrative in the media. And we wanted to have our stake in that conversation. Obviously, we want HP to be prominent in that conversation, but so we knew we needed to bring something new. And bring some original thought, some compelling, interesting, original IP that could take that conversation in a different direction and somewhere more nuanced and more interesting, particularly as business leaders struggle to figure this out, right? Because we're all learning, all of us, HP included. How do we get this right? How do we make sure that our employees really have the best experiences in this new era? And we kind of like, not even thinking about hybrid work, but just work as it is now. It's changed. So that's really the genesis of this research. We wanted to understand that new dynamic in more detail and with more nuance, so that we can be of genuine interest and of genuine use as we bring this into different conversations. So commissioned some research to unpack, actually beyond the where, like what is the how and the who for, and all of the different nuances that sit behind the way people work right now. And it's been really interesting to dive into that and see what we've learned.
And it wasn't a social media poll that was up for a week. We're talking about, more than 15,000 respondents, 12 countries, cutting across ITDMs, knowledge workers, and leaders, all sizes of organizations. This is really some in-depth global research.
It is, and we wanted it to be meaningful. We had, we could have made some assumptions, we could have jumped to some conclusions, but actually to make the conversation more compelling and to be able to sustain it over the long term, we knew we needed to get deep. So yeah, David, you're right. We pushed this research out across 12 countries. We did it actually back in June and July of this year over a period of weeks. And in each of those 12, we started with 12 countries. I'm hoping we can expand that to even more over time, because we'll continue to do this each year and keep it fresh. But for each of the 12 that we started with, we surveyed 1,000 knowledge workers or desk-based workers, 200 IT decision makers, and 100 business leaders. So we got those different perspectives in each market. And of course, then globally as well, we've got some really nice comparisons to look at.
So what were the big gotchas? What were the big ideas that came out of this research that either we knew about but didn't have confirmed, or we didn't know about at all and caught us by surprise?
I think it was, as I mentioned, there were some things that I think we could have guessed at in the past, and what came out of the research was now hard data to prove it and show us, that these things are actually happening, but also the scale to which they're happening. And there were some interesting pieces in there. We asked some very pointed questions of our respondents in terms of not just how healthy is your relationship with work today, and we'll come back to that one in a moment. That was kind of the fundamental, like what is the state of the world's relationship with work right now? But we also unpacked some particular drivers. What are the drivers that sit behind a healthy relationship with work? And then asked our respondents, would you be willing to take a pay cut to get more of these things that will help you to be happier at work, the things you say you need to be happier at work? And 83% of our respondents said that they would be willing to earn less to be happier at work. And we even dove a little deeper into that in terms of how much would you be willing to earn less to find some of these things. So yeah, some really good findings there that shows not just, yes, people would be willing to earn less, but the importance of these things, that they're actually willing to put their money where their mouth is to find things that really matter to them. And this goes back to, I think, the fundamental that ran through all of the research is that expectations have changed. Even from where people were 2 to 3 years ago, people are now looking for more, for different, for better than they had just a short while ago. And that came through in pretty much every aspect of what we looked at.
Now, I'll put up the link to the actual website. There's an HP website that's covering all this information, so it'll be on the screen here, and you can download the report to get all the details if you want. But do you want to run us through some of the highlights? Do you have a couple of pictures that you want to show us about how some of the research came out, and highlight some of the things that were stunning to you? And I'll tell you then some of the things that were stunning to me.
Absolutely, David. Yeah, let me show you a couple of things which I think help to bring the story to life. Okay, so here's a chart that to start off with. This was one of the fundamental findings of the research, that just 27% of people have a healthy relationship with work today. You can see the country splits here, by the way, and obviously there's a lot more detail on this in the Work Relationship Index report that you can download from our website, hp.com/WRI. But really, I mean, obviously that number is very low. So that was a little startling to us to see just where the state of the world's relationship with work is right now. A lot of room for improvement. Interestingly, here was that the 4 emerging markets that we surveyed all outperformed the more mature markets. And there were a number of reasons why. We saw some different factors behind that. But prominent amongst those was just confidence in skills. There was a less confidence in mature markets around both hard skills, the kind of business technical skills, but also the soft skills as well, the people and power skills. Just 31% on average saying that they feel consistently confident in their proficiency in either of those. That was a slightly different story in the emerging markets, where that confidence was a lot higher. So and just to unpack a little bit further, that 27%, we asked a number of questions around this, but one of the fundamental questions we asked was, how are you feeling about your relationship with work right now? And we asked people to respond across a 5-point scale, as you can see here. What was very interesting was, ordinarily, I think we would consider those who are very happy or somewhat happy to be in a good spot, in a healthy relationship with work. But when we started to dive a little deeper into the data, we saw that actually even the people in box 2, in the somewhat happy column, that drop off is very severe. It's sudden and severe. Like, the drop off is significant right away. We don't have to get even into box 3 before we see the drop off. It happens much earlier than we would have expected. Double the amount of people would consider leaving their company, even just in box 2. And if you look at some of the other data points we looked at about people who say their relationship with work is exactly how they want it to be, or who say that work has a positive impact on their life, the drop off from box 1 to box 2 was significant enough that we were not comfortable saying that those who are somewhat happy have a healthy relationship with work. We could see that actually they may not be in a good spot. They're in a watch out zone. So this is how we quantify this. That 27% that I showed on the previous slide, the healthy relationship people are just those who answered in that first box. And then everyone else we're kind of keeping an eye on. And there's certainly a critical zone as you go into box 3, 4, and 5. So really interesting to see that drop off being as sudden and as significant as it turned out to be.
Yeah, one of the data points that came out of this that I was completely floored by was the idea of the cost of what we're looking at right here, not just the human factors, and the human factors are significant, how many people are unhappy and thinking of leaving their work, but what the cost for an organization would be to recruit and retain and keep people in productivity, and the cost to the individuals in terms of their health. I mean, you certainly can explain some of that, but it was amazing to see those statistics.
Yeah, those effects, as you say, go in those 2 different directions. From a business perspective, it's alarming, and you can see here the comparison between those critical zone workers, which was boxes 3, 4, 5, and those in a healthy zone. You can see the difference straight away. When people's relationships with work are not where they want them to be, this is what you see straight away. There's people say they're less productive to a greater extent. Engagement with work falls away. Disconnection from the organization. And then obviously retention, as you mentioned, retaining your best talent becomes a lot harder. far more people say they consider leaving the organization when they're not in a good place. As we were saying up front, things that we would have probably guessed at in the past and made some assumptions about, but really good now to see the hard data around the extent to which that happens. In terms of the impact on people, David, as you point out, this also has a defined impact on people's well-being. And again, things that we would think might be the case, but here you can see it writ large. Again, when people's relationships with work are not where they want to be, 62% say they have struggle maintaining their physical health. And you can see some of the ways that manifests itself, eating more unhealthy foods, not working out, not sleeping as much as they should, gaining weight, and so on. Mental well-being certainly takes a bit of a beating. People suffering with their self-worth, feeling like a failure, lower self-esteem, and so on. Even down at the bottom there, relationships suffer too. Folks telling us that they're not able to be the partner or friend or parent that they want to be. So in either direction, this is a wake-up call.
And it was interesting also out of the data that I was looking at, that the no matter who you spoke with, for the most part, everyone agreed this needs to change. This needs to change now. The leadership thinks it needs to change. Employees thinks it needs to change. Everybody thinks what we've experienced over the last 2 or 3 years of the pandemic and then coming out of the pandemic has forever changed the environment. So, when people talk about return to office and return to the past, I think we're starting to get some significant acknowledgement that there really isn't going to be a return to the past.
No, Dave, you're right. We saw that in the responses from each group, that knowledge workers, IT decision makers, and business leaders all agree that the time now is to do something different. We need to redefine, we need to recast these relationships with work. So much has changed in the last 2 to 3 years. And interesting to see the extent here on the left-hand side to which all parties agreed with that. Business leaders more than anyone else, which is super interesting. And also just a data point over on the right-hand side here, which I think I was a little surprised at. We asked people who's actually responsible for improving these relationships, who the onus is on who to make this better. And you would expect, my employer, my company's leadership, you'd expect people to look to those around them to help to make a difference, my manager. But super interestingly, 73% of knowledge workers say it was also on them. That they too have a role, that they should be empowered to help to make this change and make a difference. So that sense of empowerment and agency, which came through in a number of other areas of the research, landed here too, which was very helpful. David, I'll just show you a little bit more in terms of that data point that I mentioned earlier. This was where 83% of knowledge workers told us that they'd be willing to earn less money to find some of these key factors to be happier at work. We asked them specifically in a couple of areas, how much of a pay cut would you be prepared to take to find, for example, more empathetic leadership, more emotionally intelligent leadership, or above average employee engagement and fulfillment in the workplace? And so they got granular here. And the outcome was an 11% pay cut on average that people would be prepared to take to find more of that. You can see down at the bottom here, the generational splits. Gen Z and millennials leading the way, but also Gen X and boomers putting some skin in the game here, which was very interesting. One more question that we asked along the same lines: how much of your salary would you be prepared to give up to work somewhere that lets you work where you want and when you want? And here the average was even a little higher, 13%. And you can see again, there were some differences across the generations, but all parties willing to part with some money, it seems, to find that more empathetic, more empowering way of working.
So those are really fascinating numbers with skin in the game. I mean, the idea that people would actually be willing to take pay cuts. And honestly, I don't know how true that is from a survey that somebody would be willing to give back money, but I think it's more telling that they would be willing to work for less if they're in a better environment, which impacts the large number of people that are already contemplating working someplace else. That as they look around, wherever they would get more of the better factors, they wouldn't need as much of a salary, which is a very interesting thing for companies to know as well. So as we got through all of this data, obviously we came up with the idea of what action should be taken. What do we want to measure? How do you measure companies, improving along a scale? What did we find? What were the key factors?
Yeah, this was we analyzed when we went into this with our eyes open. We were willing to see what the data would tell us in terms of what is most important. What are those key drivers that sit behind a healthy relationship with work? Very important for us to bring that forward as part of the study as well, so that we can we can think about how do we do this better and what should businesses be thinking about to help improve experiences for their employees as we go forward. So just to share with you, what do we find in that regard? Out of the 50 or so factors that we studied in the research, 6 drivers really rose to the top. 6 things for businesses to be carefully thinking about as we go forward, as we think about how to improve the experience for our employees. And you'll see each of these in the report. There are sections on these. There's a lot of data behind these 6, which help to illuminate them. And then also some recommendations that we brought forward that businesses can be considering. But just to unpack each of these very briefly, fulfillment showed itself to be absolutely key. Employees are looking for greater purpose and meaning in their work than I think they ever were. But even beyond that, greater agency and voice as well in the workplace. They're looking for more of a say in the work that they do, in how success is measured, and so on. Leadership was a key one too. Leaders themselves recognizing that the leadership toolkit is different now, has to be different now. So much has changed that the approach to leadership has to change in lockstep. And a lot of emphasis through the study and through the findings around the need for greater empathy, greater emotional connection from leaders, employees looking for their leaders to be more vulnerable, more authentic, to show themselves more, and so on. People centricity, this is all about people feeling valued and respected as human beings, not just human doings, and being seen as more than just a number. So there's a great opportunity here for businesses to consider how they can be more visible about putting people first and more demonstrably placing people at the heart of decision-making, for example, and so on. Skills, the 4th driver, a lot of focus on skills. It found its way into the leadership category, of course, as well, the leadership skill set and toolkit. But equally, just for the workforce as a whole, there's clearly a crisis of confidence when it comes to skills, people not feeling confident when it comes to their business and technical skills, their people and power skills, and they're looking for help. They're looking for their employers to give them opportunity here. Tools was very, very interesting as well. A lot of focus here on the democratization of technology, that we're hearing from workers that they want to say in the tech that they get to use each day and the tech that they get from their employer. And this is, of course, this opens up a lot of great avenues for businesses to think about technology as actually a vehicle for employee engagement and to bring your employees along with you and give them the experience that you want them to have. And then finally, workspace. There were 2 main themes here, flexibility and trust in one direction, employees looking to be able to choose where they work each day according to the work that they're doing, the needs of their role, the needs of the business, of course. But also, as they work from and move between different locations, they want and expect that experience to be completely seamless. So lots of data points there. What we've put in the report is, and you can spend a bit of time on this if you're reading the report, is some recommendations and some greater context about each of these 6 things that came through from the data, some of those core themes, again, for businesses to be thinking about. And these are things that this is a dialogue, of course, that we'll continue to have over the year and the years ahead. And that takes us into the actual index, the measure that we intend to track. This is obviously the first year that we're doing this, but we want to track this over time, and we'll refresh this research every year going forward. But these are some of the numbers, the index itself that we'll be measuring. In the middle there, you've got that core number, the 27% who have a healthy relationship with work today. And then around the outside, you've got the current performance scores for each of those 6 core drivers. We asked respondents to measure or indicate, first of all, what are the importance of these things? But then beyond that, what is the current performance of those individual items, and how much are people experiencing these day to day in their work? And that's the numbers that you see here, all quite low and with a lot of improvement. And we'll see how those needles move over time.
Right, so it's interesting that we did this. What can we expect in the years ahead in terms of looking at this research? Is this something that HP is going to continue to survey? Will the survey grow? Will it change? Will we show some trend lines in this? And the other question about that is how much do you think people are going to pay attention to this? You know, the old Winston Churchill quote is occasionally mankind stumbles across the truth, but he usually gets up and keeps going. Do we think anybody's going to take this seriously?
David, I hope so. And actually, we wanted the detail in the research to be, of such depth and quality that would be of genuine use to business leaders and organizations around the world. We know everyone is trying to figure this out and doing a lot of listening and learning. So we genuinely hope this will be helpful. and we'll add to conversations as people think about this going forward. We will continue to track it every year. We want this to be an ongoing conversation. It's about the future of work. So could the content of this shift over time? Could there be different angles that we explore? Absolutely. I don't expect us to be measuring exactly the same things next year as we did this year. There's going to be some other things we'll want to look at. The world is changing all the time, of course. So we'll keep it current, we'll keep it fresh. But I think this gives us a really nice measure and metric in terms of where people are in their experience in the workplace and what are some of the things that they're saying. We can continue to surface that on an ongoing basis, and I hope drive some really good, interesting, and productive conversations as we all figure this out.
So as a last question, let me ask you a little bit of your personal opinion about this. One of the things that I've been discussing with a lot of industry colleagues is that the idea that we're not at the end of whatever this journey is that we're on, that we started a few years ago. We're thankfully at the end of people dying in mass numbers, which was, incredibly awful. But now that we have treatments and things like that, so that part of the pandemic is over. But we're still in the middle of this journey of trying to figure it out. And some analysts have said we're actually still just at the beginning. If we go into the future and look back, maybe 5 or 10 years from now, we'll have seen the journey that we're on. Right now, we're in the middle of it, so we can't really get a sense of its scope. Where do you think we are? Where do you think the future of work is going to be? Is it something that is going to be a complete revolution, and this will set the tone for the next 100 years, or do you think we're going to sort of eventually go back to something more resembling what we were doing 2 and 3 and 4 years ago?
It's going to be very interesting to see. I don't know if we know what that outcome will be, because as you say, we went through such a dramatic change in 2020. And I think we're still kind of unpacking the after effects of that. And it's very interesting. As we looked around, as we were preparing to do this study, we were doing a lot of research on where people are, what's the current dialogue. And it was very clear that everyone is still grappling with this and trying to work out and trying to anticipate, as you said, what ultimately will the future hold? Where will we land in years from now? I think we need to keep learning and listening together, and listening to employees in particular. I think making sure that our employees feel that they have a voice in that discussion. Workers around the world have a lot of needs and thoughts and different expectations than they once did. Certainly that has shifted, I think, dramatically, and is lasting. So, the successful businesses, the successful employers of the future, I think, will be those who are listening well and listening hard and understanding what are those changed expectations look like. How are they manifesting themselves on a day-to-day basis, and how can they tap into those to retain and attract the best talent in the industry? I think employers that do that well and are cognizant of the changing and evolving dynamics around them could position themselves very nicely for success in the future.
Right. So this is definitely the first time we're talking about this report, because it's the first time the report has existed. It's not going to be the last time that we're talking about it with colleagues and with industry experts and with analysts, and we'll try and get a sense of what everybody's feelings are. One more time, Matt, if somebody wants to download the report or to get more information, what's the website? Where can they go to get information?
Thanks, David. Yes, head to hp.com/WRI for Work Relationship Index. That's the name of our report. So head there, you'll see some of the key findings presented on our website. There's a link to download the report. It's about a 45 page document. As I say, lots of data points in there, really nicely presented. So there's some core themes that come through very nicely through that document. I'd encourage anyone to have a good look at it, take a look at our recommendations as well. And yes, this is the start of the dialogue. We will continue to bring this forward again year on year and see where that index changes over time.
And the really long social media hashtag for this is HP Work Relationship Index. Hashtag HP Work Relationship Index. So you can take a look online and see what people are saying about this, and just join our show. Occasionally we'll have people on here, and I don't want to give too many hints away, but this may not be the only data from this report that we're releasing. We may have some interesting other revelations as we look into the various metrics that we came up with and some of the regional breakdowns, and we'll try and give some more information to everyone else as well. So Matt, thanks very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, David. Great chatting with you.
Thank you. So that's it for this week's episode of Poly Weekly News. For all of my colleagues at HP and Poly, thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate you spending time with us every week, and we'll see you next week.